When people think about archaeologists, the image that I always get is one of Harrison Ford and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and people going around stealing from tombs and looking for treasure. And this really isn't the sort of thing that we're about at all, although I love those movies. Basically, it's a detective story and a way of isolating little pockets of information that can then be turned to your advantage. And although we wish we had Harrison Ford's bank account, we really aren't that kind of archaeologist at all.
Director of the dig, Dr. David Soren of the University of Arizona, is an archaeological sleuth. A year ago, on a hunch, he excavated here. The sweat and toil is inspired, in part, by an ancient account of disaster recorded by an historian in 365 AD. He wrote, "On the 21st of July, preceded by heavy and repeated thunder and lightning, the whole of the firm and solid earth was shaken and trembled." A word-for-word report of a devastating series of earthquakes. Dr. Soren believes the cataclysms destroyed a Roman city here called Kourion, sealing it beneath the green crust of earth. Last season, the quake theory paid off. An 800-pound watering trough was discovered, smashed against the wall. Also discovered near the trough were coins, common at the time of the earthquake. This season, the contents of a central pile of debris fascinate Soren's team. Field Director Ron Gardner must supervise its dissection piece by piece.
You go quickly and excavate, and then you have to stop and brush everything carefully, have it photographed, and then you rip it out. Then you do the same thing again.
As the rubble is coaxed apart, an archaeological paradox is at work. As detectives, archaeologists must destroy the scene of the crime to get to the bottom of how the house was structured. To reconstruct this vestige of Kourion in the mind's eye, loose debris must be sifted. Then the position of all building materials and contents must be surveyed and drawn before they are removed.
1.770. 1.653.
The nitty-gritty of recording the location of every nail, every detail, falls on the shoulders of John and Peggy Sanders and their computer.
5.766.
The computer mapping system that we have developed can be divided into two parts. The use of a small handheld computer that we take into the field to collect the raw data, and the use of a larger desktop computer back in the office to produce the actual publication drawings. We measured 136 today. That's a centimeter difference. The slump in the wall would take care of that.
For these excavations at Kourion, we're producing drawings that will allow us to form composites of various levels of excavation. At different levels, there are different artifacts. Each artifact or each level of artifacts is one drawing, and we can combine or take away on the computer as the director desires.
Still, the structure of the house eludes Soren. With only a precious week of digging remaining, he investigates a 20th century Cypriot town, partially destroyed by landslides and now deserted.
It's very important not only to find parallels for the kinds of architecture that we have, but also to understand what the quality of life was like, what the standard of living was in Kourion at that time. But it's incredibly valuable for us to give us another window back into time so we can see exactly, or at least near enough, what our site might have been like over 1,600 years ago.
In what resembles a storage room, a central column is discovered, one upright supporting an entire roof. Stone walls in the town closely resemble those at the dig site and seem to confirm Soren's theory of continuity. The theory is borne out when a massive supporting column is discovered under the central debris. Momentum builds as another find comes to light, the remains of a skeleton crushed by a door lintel as the house crumbled. In America, Walter Birkby, a forensic expert, solves murder mysteries. At Kourion, he reads these ancient bones like a book.
During the collapse of the roof or the upper floor, whichever it turns out to be archaeologically, this individual came pummeling through that space, lit on the door lintel, and from all indications, the back of the skull was probably impacted by subsequent falling blocks, so that the skull itself was fractured and shattered.
Resin is poured to bind the smashed remains together for later examination. The skeleton builds hope that the team is closing in on the living area of the structure, but a bittersweet discovery awaits them.
What's the coverage on this area? Is it fresco everywhere now?
Fragments of wall fresco, their worth impossible to determine, seem to be everywhere. All digging must stop in the area for the rest of the season. A tough call for Soren, knowing more discoveries lay literally under their feet. In archaeology, all artifacts are treated with equal respect.
I'm wondering if it doesn't dissolve in the ground.
I think it probably does with the alkaline nature of the soil.
And this is just preserved in a little pocket for some reason.
Well, the block was loaded with these snails. So there was open space there. There was way in.
So this is really rare, yeah.
So I think
everything's in very bad condition, partly because it's been crushed by rubble during the earthquake, and also the soil conditions here have been fairly alkaline, so a lot of the materials that don't survive in an alkaline environment are deteriorated, and there's been a lot of percolation of water because of the air pockets in the rubble, so the water runs down through, and also you've got a very salty environment. You have wall painting that you can't touch. If you just brush it, it just falls apart.
The fresco pieces join thousands of Kourion pottery fragments at a conservation centre a mile away. Here they are cleaned and meticulously photographed for the record. Risking their fragile work for the record, conservationists replace the pots exactly where the fragments were originally discovered at the site. To photograph this recreation and original finds from a bird's-eye view, an arcane contraption called a bipod carries a still camera aloft.
Right, bring it up. Bob, pull. Just let it go, Liz. Okay, hold it there.
The shot weeks before, and now after. The 5-week dig is coming to a close. After over 14,000 man-hours logged this season, Dr. Soren feels he's barely scratched the surface of a city lost in centuries and shrouded in time.
I think for me the most important thing is to begin to form a mental picture of what I think has gone on, and then I pretend I'm there. I go back in time. This is what I really enjoy. Archaeology is particularly important because it gives you a strong idea of where we have been as a civilization. If history or culture or art are important, then archaeology must be one of the links. It's a good way for us to understand our past.